Hi guys, welcome back to the part 2 of my earlier video, and in this video I am going to discuss the Capgemini interview questions. And we have a questions like Hibernate and Spring Boot microservices and Core Java, Java 8 design pattern. So make sure you watch this video till the very end, and you will get an idea what type of questions are asked and how you can answer them. If you are struggling with the interviews, this video will be very helpful for you. So now I will go to the questions one by one and talk about them. So our very first question is on Spring. Alright, so in Spring I have two controllers, and in these two controllers I have two methods. Each I want to do exception handling on the global level for all these four methods. So how we can do that? Okay, so to handle the exception in Spring Boot, there are some concept called controller advice and handle exception. Controller advice. All right. So to handle the exception globally, there is an annotation called controller advice which you have to use on the class level. So you need to create a class, and inside that will be your advice class or exceptional handler class. That is not your controller class, that is a different class. So in that you will mention all the methods for which you want to handle the exception. All right, so this you will use on the class level, you will use the annotation called controller advice. I will just write it out, controller advice. And on the method level you will use exception handler. So you will create some method, a method for any controller or controller's method for which you are expecting some exception, and then you are handling that exception right here. So on the method level you will write exceptional handler annotation, exception handler annotation. And inside that method you will write about the exception which you are facing and what type of exception you are expecting from that. And if you are getting that exception, then what you need to do, how you will handle that, what type of message you want to return to the end user. So these things you can write, and this can be done in a single class on a global level. And all the controllers, for all the methods of controllers, you can write the exceptional handler methods, and then you can handle the exception. So this is like a way to answer this question. You can read about this in detail and answer like on detail as well. So I will quickly jump to the next question, which is in Spring we have path variable and request param. So what is the difference between two? We have these are two annotations. These are two annotation, path variable and request param. So if these are two annotation which will look something like this. The path variable is something like this, and if I talk about request param, it has capital R in request and then param, and there is annotation as well. So yeah, these will look something like this. So path variable is used to place a placeholder from the URI, and in the case of request param, it is used to obtain the parameter from the URI as well. It is also used to get the parameter from the URI as well. But request param is more useful in the web application where data is mostly passed in the query parameters, while path variable is more suitable for restful web services where URI contains values. All right. So these are the difference between path variable and request param. And now I will go to the next question, which is let me just select it. So suppose what's supposed to be held www.test.com. So how we can pass request param and how we can pass path variable in this URL. Okay, so as in the interviewer asked that how you can use request param and how you can use a path variable while using path variable and by using request param, how you can do that. So you just need to place the placeholder using this URL. So I will give you a simple example. So if you have this URL www.test.com, so using the request param, how it will look, so it will look something like this. it will look like, suppose you want to give id is equal to 4. So in that case, this is test. So in that case, what I will do, id question mark id is equal to 4. So you are passing the id value as 4. Okay, so this is the case of request param. Request param. And if I talk about a path variable here, if I talk about path variable, then I will write it something like this. This is www.test.com, then slash test, then I will write slash 4. Okay, so this is how URI look in the case of path variable, and this is how URI look in the case of request param. So I'm sure you got an idea how request param and path variable works. Now I will go to the next question quickly. So I will select the next question, which is on, do you know how we do transaction management in our application? So there are multiple ways to do the transaction management in application. So if it is a Spring Boot application or Spring application in general, you can use transactional annotation on the class level to make that class transactional class. Of course, there are various other ways as well which has been used in the past. So if you are using Hibernate, then you have to create the transaction on your own, and then you can write the persistence logic or the data, the lines of the code which are interacting with the DB, and then you have to close the connection. And if I talk about old way, which is JDBC way, there itself you have to do the same thing. You have to open the transaction, you have to write execute queries, and then you have to close the connection. But in the spring, the spring makes it very easy. In spring you just need to use the transactional annotation on the class level, and your class will be transactional. So there are other annotation as well which you have to use, which is enable transactional management. On the configuration level you have to use enable transaction management, and there are like few other examples as well how you can use. And so automatically it will be rolled back. You don't need to roll back the transaction, because uh, you are giving it on the class level that this class will perform certain transactional activities. And in that you also give the properties like propagation and isolation, what type of isolation you want to have, and what type of propagation. Is it a nested annotation, nested propagation, or some other type of uh, um, propagation you want? In that you can also mention that as well. So this is how you manage the transaction uh, in your Spring application. Now I will go to the next question, which is, what do you understand by transaction management in terms of database? So what is transaction management? So transaction is something, if I talk about transaction, transaction is something, you suppose you have certain DB steps, you have to perform certain DB steps, and you have to interact with the DB, and then you have to get the value from the DB, set the value from the DB. So you have to perform all the actions on the DB. So it's like a sequence of action you are performing, and that sequence of action will be treated as a single unit of work. So if one single action is failed, all the other action will be also rolled back. So in the first step you are updating something in the DB, in the second step you are updating some other table in the DB, or in the third step you are doing something which is also related to the DB, like updating or reading the value from the DB, and that third step will fail. So if third step failed, then all the other steps, step 1 and step 2, will be also rolled back. So that is transaction. And that's how we do the transaction management in terms of DB. So there are 4 different properties of any transaction, which is atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. We call it ACID properties. Okay, so in the real RDBMS database system will guarantee that all 4 property for each transaction. The simplistic way of a transaction issued for the database is using is something like that. When you begin the transaction, you have begin transaction command. Okay, and when you perform various like delete, update, insert queries, using the SQL queries, and after that if the operation is successful you perform the commit, otherwise rollback operation. So this is how in the transaction management works in the case of RDB MS. Okay, so I will just deselect this question right now and select the other question, which is something like this: how we are managing transaction in Hibernate application. So in the case of Hibernate application, you also can manage the transaction, as I earlier mentioned as well. So in Hibernate application, what happens? You have to create a session object first. You have to create a session object from a session factory, and after creating the session object you will begin the transaction by using the session object, and then you will perform certain action on the database, like using the save or persist method on updating the like values in the database or reading the values in the database, and then you will perform the commit. And if like commit is not successful and if there is any error in the queries or something, so you will write rollback statement as well. So you will write something like this: you will write something like this. First you have like a session object and transaction object, and then you will create session object and transactional object, and then in the try block, in the like using the session factory, you will open a session, and then uh, by using the begin transaction method you will create a transactional object. You will give some values in the transactional object, and then you will perform certain action. These action can be any DB actions, like interacting with the DB using save and persist method, and then you will commit the transaction. And suppose something happened in the try block, some exception occurring and something happened in between, and because of that transaction is not happened successfully. In that case you need to roll back the transaction as well. So you will roll back the transaction in the cache block. So this is how we manage the transaction in the case of Hibernate. So I will just remove these space and deselect this as well. Now I will go to the next question, which is: do you know in the Hibernate the concept of cascading? So if I talk about cascading, cascading is a feature in Hibernate which is used to manage the state of the mapped entity. Okay, so whenever you are having any superclass which is affected by the query or by any execution of query, if the subclass is also affected from that or not, so that thing is managed by cascading. So there are various annotation you have to use in the case of cascading, the cascade annotation is all the cascade annotation is there on the entity level, you have to use it. So there are cascade type as well, cascade type dot all, delete, detach, lock, merge, persist. So these things you can also use. So this represents that the change in the one table will affect the other table or not. So this is a very big topic actually, and you can refer any online YouTube channel. There is a very good channel called Telesco. You can watch the video on cascading of Telesco, and you will get a better idea how you can answer these questions. Okay, and if I go to the next question now, which is: what about the different fetch type in Hibernate? So in this interview there are multiple questions which are asked in the Hibernate itself. So another question is also in Hibernate, which is: what are the different fetch types? Okay, so there are two different type of fetch types in Java. One is lazy fetching and one is eager. Okay, so in the case of lazy, it will fetch the child entity lazily. So it won't find the it won't fetch the child entity uh, eagerly, not at that moment. It will do that lazily. And in the case of eager, it will fetch the child entity along with the parent entity. So I will tell you the example and you will get to know. So suppose you have a employee table, and inside that employee inside the employee object you have a address object as well, and that address object is having parameters like city, country, and all these things. So whenever the fetch type is lazy, so that moment it will only fetch the employee detail. It will not fetch the address detail, because address detail in some other another table. And in the case of fetch type dot eager, when the fetch type is eager, it will fetch the employee details and the address detail as well at the same moment. So this is these are the different fetch types available in the Hibernate. Okay, so this was our like connect, I mean the answer of this question. There are multiple there are multiple questions from here as well. So what I will do, so now I have explained like so many questions, and this video is already very long. So what I will do now, I will create another part of this video, and in that I will explain what are the other questions as well which are asked in Capgemini interview. So make sure you watch that video also. I will explain everything very quickly, which will be very helpful in the revision also. So make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and subscribe to my other channel as well. And if you need any help regarding the resume, or do you have any general query, you can go to the link in the description and contact me directly. And you can also become a platinum member, which for by which you will get all the early access of these type of videos, these type of parts and everything. So make sure you become a platinum member as well. It will be very helpful while clearing your interview. Thank you so much for watching this video till the very end. Bye bye, I will see you in the next video.